Okay, U.S. history, let's get going. Today we're talking more about the 1990s, and we're doing it through the lens of looking at the Clinton presidency. As you guys know, he was president for the better part of the decade, a two-term uh, president. So we're gonna pick up where we left off with the PowerPoint, and we're going to go through some of this, and then we're going to switch to a document that goes along with U.S. History Crash Course number 45, and your questions, your assignment that is due on Friday. Those answers can be found not only in this PowerPoint, but they can also be found if you just watch Crash Course number 45. But as you guys know, those videos go really fast. So we're gonna go over those answers at the end of this PowerPoint. So basically, this is a reminder. Downtown group. So basically, if you stick with me and watch this PowerPoint, you should get a 100 on that. Not now, Alexa. Um, on that assignment. So we mentioned this yesterday. How Clinton, of course, was a Democrat, but in the midterm elections, the Republicans dominated. This tends to usually be the case, or is often the case, where if the president is Party A, a lot of times Party B wins big victories in the congressional elections. That's not always the case, but it was definitely the case with Clinton. Clinton does a few things in terms of fighting crime. Number one, he gets the Brady Bill passed, a gun control act named for James Brady, who was wounded in the 1981 assassination attempt on Reagan. Also, an anti-crime bill bans several kinds of weapon. We talked about Columbine yesterday. Can't stress enough what a huge deal that was. And the Oklahoma City bombing, that was the biggest terrorist incident that Clinton faced, and it was a domestic terrorist. It was an American. But we talked about all this yesterday, so why don't we scooch ahead? Clinton was impeached, of course. At the start of the year, you might have thought that impeached means kicked out of office, but it does not, as you all know now. So Clinton was impeached, but he was not removed from office because the Senate, which remember was a Republican majority, they didn't have the necessary votes, of course, to um, remove a president from office. They have to have a 2/3 majority, which that's really pretty hard to come by unless the president just does something, really, really heinous. Um, really, it's essentially unheard of. Well, let's watch a little bit of the testimony from the Clinton impeachment. Let's make sure this comes from a reputable news source before we play it in class.
Hey, I'm Nick, and I'm wearing.
Okay, CBS Evening News. As I've stressed all year long, you got to be careful when you're looking for information on the internet. It can be an incredible uh, source, but you can get bogus info as well.
That is not my recollection. My recollection is that I did not have sexual relations with Ms. Lewinsky, and I'm staying on my former statement about that.
It was a ceremony no living American has seen until now. As the Constitution dictates, they came to tell the Senate they had accused the president of high crimes and misdemeanors, and to argue he be removed from office.
Today, the president's lawyers did what they could to influence the shape of the trial, while Mr. Clinton himself, at least publicly, ignored the historic moment. Shortly after the jurors were sworn, the president unveiled a new education proposal, never mentioning his new status as a defendant at trial.
That is one of the most iconic lines in presidential history, at least in recent history. It's certainly not like a proud moment, but it's very famous nonetheless. It's a very well known soundbite. While Clinton was president, there was a civil war in Somalia, and the U.S. was heavily involved in distributing food and helping to facilitate peace. Part of that peacekeeping force, 18 Americans were killed. They made a movie about this called Black Hawk Down that, if you're into war movies, I recommend it. And after that, shortly thereafter, we withdrew troops. I'm not sure why this thing isn't moving for me, but we'll just do it this way. There was a military coup in Haiti as well. They overthrew their president, and thousands of Haitians fled when that happened. So we saw a big influx in Haitian immigrants. Eventually, in '94, the U.S. Troops are going to be able to restore Aristide's power. So they help him get his office back. We also have a crisis in the Balkans, and we haven't talked about the Balkans since our chapter on World War One. But communism collapses in Yugoslavia, and some of the territories that were part of the Yugoslavian Republic break away. Hostilities break out, and civil war starts in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was newly independent. In Serbia, and we won't spend much time on this, but Slobodan Milosevic led an ethnic cleansing to remove Muslims. So, doing really terrible things, and the U.S. sends troops and peacekeeping troops with NATO. Eventually, they're going to bomb some targets, and ultimately, they get the Dayton Accords signed. There was unrest in Kosovo, Rwanda. In Israel, we see something called the Oslo Accords, which is a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Obviously, this doesn't last, but it was a somewhat of a triumph. So he's going to promise Palestinian self rule in Jericho along the Gaza Strip, and give support for the Israelis. But the West Bank remained unsettled. So that's really been the site of a lot of the unrest, the West Bank, they call it. Everybody knows about the World Trade Center attacks of September 11th, 2001, but a lot of people don't know, or maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but we don't talk a lot about the 1993 bombings because they weren't nearly as deadly. But the World Trade Center is bombed by a truck bomb, and it kills 6 people, injures hundreds of more. The World Trade Center, just from the name to the city it's located in to the size of it, it makes sense that that's seen by a lot of terrorists as being sort of the like a monument to Western evil. So 2001 was not the first time that it was attacked. Al Qaeda and this guy Osama bin Laden. That's a terrorist network. And in '98, Al Qaeda starts bombing American embassies. Does it in Nairobi, Kenya. Um, he wouldn't get taken out till years later, but eventually we do get him. We also see a bombing attack on the USS Cole. NAFTA. Maybe this is something. If you don't know what it is, it's possible you've heard this term, this word, but it's a free trade agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And the idea was to create a free trade zone where Mexico, U.S., and Canada could trade without being considered like a foreign import, basically, at least in terms of payments and taxes and such. So now we're going to look at post presidency in a minute, but now let's look at these questions you guys are going to answer. So I'm going to post your lesson here, this video. This is the link for the crash course. And here's your assignment. It's just 10 true false questions, and we're going to go over them right now. These assignments, they're not intended to trick you. True false. Bill Clinton, who attended an Ivy League university and served as governor of Arkansas, came from a broken home in the South. He did. He was raised by a single mom, and of course, he was a native of Arkansas. True or false? In the middle of Clinton's first term, his party lost control of both the House and the Senate to the Republicans, whose powerful speaker, Newt Gingrich, was determined to cut taxes and regulation as well as reform welfare. That is true. Remember, Gingrich is the front man for the Republican dominated Congress, and he is able to implement some new policies. True or false? Clinton's popularity had a lot to do with a strong economy. one that featured falling unemployment coupled with both low inflation and low fuel prices. That's true as well. There's really nothing, as we've I think I said it probably the first unit in the school year, or in the semester. Money, and I've said it 50 times since then. Money is really, it plays a role in politics that you just can't deny. And for a president, a lot of times it doesn't really matter that much what's going on, um, outside of the economy. If you have a strong economy as president, chances are you're going to be viewed pretty favorably. You'll be popular. So Clinton was, popular for that reason, among others. He had a sign on the wall of the Oval Office, or excuse me, in his campaign headquarters that said, "It's the economy, stupid." True or false? Rates of death by AIDS as well as imprisonment sharply declined. No, remember, there was the AIDS epidemic continued, and imprisonment skyrocketed. And of course, that imprisonment was, um, disproportionately African American. True or false? Clinton was impeached for lying under oath, and in early 1999 was found guilty by the Senate and removed from the presidency. The first president ever to be removed from office. Hopefully, you don't need me to tell you this, but he of course, was not removed from office. True or false? The most significant tech development during Clinton's administration was the invention of the DVD player. As someone who remembers when the DVD player was invented, I can tell you that it was pretty awesome, and people were really jacked, about watching a movie on a disc. However, that was nowhere near as epic a development as was the internet. Personal computers first, and then the internet. It is just unimaginable, life without the internet is today. But I mean, I'm 34, and I remember quite vividly the world pre-internet. It just, I can't overstate what a huge, huge development that's been. True or false? Thanks to the efforts of Hillary Clinton, the United States in the 1990s finally adopted a policy of providing free, universal health care for all its citizens. No. She tried to, but no, it didn't happen. And we still don't have that. True or false? Clinton changed the U.S. Armed Forces by allowing homosexuals to openly serve. The word openly is in italics because that's false. He implemented a policy that at the time was fairly progressive. It was called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which basically meant, by all means, if you're gay, you can be in the military, but don't tell anybody about it. And if you're in the military, don't ask. So in hindsight, it's not considered, that progressive. But at the time, it was a, I would argue, a step in the right direction. But you guys can make up your own mind about that. Finally, true or false? Clinton won the presidency by running as a liberal Democrat in the tradition of FDR and LBJ. False, right? Clinton sold himself as a moderate Democrat. And that's one reason he was able to get a lot of votes. Republicans who, or moderates who voted for George H.W. Bush in the prior election. Clinton had the benefit of being a Southern guy, which, the South, uh, has a lot of conservatives. and he ran on, not on these super liberal ideals. He ran, uh, saying that he was going to basically be a moderate liberal. Post presidency, he's stayed in the public eye, although his wife has probably been more visible. Well, definitely been more visible, having just unsuccessfully run for president in 2016. So, all right, guys. With that, we're going to stop for the day. I posted some additional resources for you to look at if you want more info. And I will talk to you all tomorrow.